What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Paddy the Baddy and Ilia Topuria reigniting their heated rivalry. Paddy Pimblett and Ilia Topuria really dislike each other, and that's an understatement. The two got into a pretty heated exchange that got physical in the lobby of the Fighters Hotel the week of UFC London back in March. Topuria was upset over comments Paddy had made last year concerning Topuria's home country of Georgia. The two went on to win their fights on that card back in March, and it looked like the UFC had a ready-made fight to set up later this year between these two. Ultimately, the UFC tapped Jordan Levitt to fight Paddy the Baddy on July 23rd, while the Georgian-born Spaniard Topuria has no fight scheduled as of this video. But that hasn't stopped either of them from throwing verbal jabs at one another on Twitter. Paddy hit first as he responded to a fan who asked him why he wasn't fighting Topuria at UFC London in July. This is what Paddy said. "Everybody says they want to fight me, bro. Called clickbait. What do you think he chatted for and caused a scene in London? So people actually knew who he was. Nobody even knew him until I bounced a bottle off his head, the little bum. I see him all week with no cameras and he's done nothing." To which Topuria quickly responded with an insult in Spanish. "Eres un." Translated, that means you. Paddy the Baddy then responded to Topuria by saying this. "Pretty homophobic, don't you think, mate? What if I actually did? What would you say then? Weirdo, you stop using my name for publicity, you little. Stick to being homophobic in your own country." In response, Topuria stated this. "I know that it is un. That's why I said it. There's nothing wrong with it. I've never tried it, so I don't know if it's good or bad. But you can keep on. Enjoy it, Paddy the Baddy. Remember, I'm your daddy." Paddy has looked great so far in the octagon, winning his first two fights for the UFC via first-round finishes, by knockout and submission, respectively. Meanwhile, Topuria remains undefeated at 12-0, with his most recent win in March being a second-round finish of Jai Herbert in his lightweight debut. What do you think? Do you feel the UFC will eventually pit these two to fight against each other at lightweight? Deiveson Figueiredo gives UFC an ultimatum while Brandon Moreno tells him to pipe down. The UFC came so close to having their very first fourth matchup between the same two opponents in Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno. But that fight was not to be. And now, we've got Kai Kara-France, one of the top flyweights in the world, fighting Moreno for the interim flyweight title on July 30th at UFC 277. That fight only came about after the UFC learned that Figueiredo suffered an injury that would sideline him for several months. Figueiredo and Moreno fought 3 separate times. The first ended in a draw. The second fight saw Moreno take the submission victory. And the third clash was when Figueiredo was handed the undisputed flyweight title via decision. Since both fighters have one win over the other, a fourth fight was expected to take place, which would serve as the rubber match and see who would take the series and the title once and for all. But Figueiredo was not at all happy that Kara-France and Moreno would fight for an interim belt, and is already thinking about making a move because of it. In a recent interview with MMA Fighting, this is what Figueiredo stated. "I don't rule out this option. It's up to the UFC. If we have a chat and they can increase my earnings inside the organization, then I'll stay in the division. But if nothing happens, I'll be forced to move up. I'll stay in the flyweight division if they increase my purse. I already wanted to move up, but still wanted to fight 3 more fights in the division. With this decision to create an interim title, they've made my decision to go up sooner 95% more likely." Figueiredo goes on to talk about how the UFC and he had some miscommunication over his recent injury that would keep him out of the cage until later in 2022. But Moreno is already sounding off on Figueiredo, saying that the Brazilian should just accept the situation and move on, especially considering that he's still the champion of the division. Case in point, this is what Moreno stated in a recent interview with Ariel Helwani.
He's saying like a lot of different crazy stuff like, "Oh, I want more money, and if UFC don't give me more money, I want to go to the bantamweight." Like, anybody cares, man. Anybody cares that. I mean, it's not like he's moving to the 135 and UFC is like, "Oh, okay, he moved to the 135. Okay, I'm gonna give you more money now."
Moreno goes on to talk about how he expects to beat Kara-France and then challenge Figueiredo for a fourth fight, imploring the Brazilian to think about the legacy that this fight could set. What do you think about Figueiredo saying he's set to move up in weight? Do you feel he should go to bantamweight or fight the winner of the Moreno-Kara-France fight? Beneil Dariush might be Charles Oliveira's biggest threat, says Paul Felder. It's still unclear who the UFC will match up against Charles Oliveira in a fight for the vacated UFC undisputed lightweight title. Oliveira is the #1 contender, but that only came about because he missed weight prior to UFC 274 and was stripped of his belt because of it. He became the #1 contender after beating Justin Gaethje via submission. Originally, the UFC had plans to give that #1 contender slot to the winner of Islam Makhachev versus Beneil Dariush, which hadn't been scheduled yet, but was likely to take place later this year. These two guys were originally supposed to fight in February, but an ankle injury forced Dariush to withdraw from that fight. Now, with Oliveira as the #1 contender, there's talk that the UFC could tap either Makhachev or Dariush for this fight. Some say that Makhachev has the better claim, seeing that he beat Bobby Green in his last fight that was supposed to be against Dariush, along with sporting a 10-fight win streak just behind Oliveira's 11-fight win streak. Also, Makhachev is not coming off an injury, while Dariush is, but former UFC lightweight Paul Felder believes that out of Makhachev and Dariush, the latter would actually give Oliveira a better run for his money. Case in point, in a recent interview on The Fighter vs. the Writer, this is what Felder stated: "I think a guy like Charles, you've got to get somebody like Dariush. The way he ran through Tony Ferguson was impressive. I think Beneil is a threat to Oliveira, even more so than Islam, just because Makhachev is going to try to wrestle him, and Charles, he has a way around those kinds of exchanges. It doesn't matter if you have great takedown defense against Charles Oliveira. He will find a way to your back. I'm going to throw a big Hail Mary out there and say my pick to beat Oliveira is Beneil Dariush." What do you think? Do you agree with Felder that Dariush is a bigger threat to Oliveira than Makhachev? Don't forget to take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to stay up to date on all of the latest fight news. John McCarthy issues a clarification over comments made about Kamaru Usman and Nick Diaz. Big John McCarthy got a lot of heat online over recent comments he made on his Weighing In podcast alongside Josh Thompson regarding welterweight champion Kamaru Usman and longtime veteran Nick Diaz. In an episode last week, McCarthy and Thompson talked about how Nick Diaz was hinting that he wanted to fight in the UFC later this year. The boys talked about a hypothetical matchup against Kamaru Usman, who has looked incredible as the welterweight champ. Diaz, meanwhile, came back last September to rematch former welterweight champion Robbie Lawler. He looked a bit slow and rusty, but it was to be expected from someone who hadn't fought in about 6 years. He ultimately tapped out of the fight in the 3rd round. McCarthy talked about how, in a hypothetical matchup, Diaz would be able to light Usman on the feet, and he was openly mocked by Aljamain Sterling over his comments, as well as others online. Now, in a recent episode of the podcast, the 59-year-old issued a clarification of those comments, saying, quote,
"What I should have said is if Kamaru will start standing up with him, and if he starts to get lit up, he's going to go right to his wrestling." The if should have been put in there. I wasn't saying that he was going to get lit up. I was saying, don't take anything from Nick Diaz in the stand-up game. He will cause anyone problem.
This is the second time this year McCarthy has backtracked on his comments, or evolved his position. A few months ago, McCarthy stated he felt the verdict in the Sterling-Peter Yan bantamweight title unification fight for UFC 273 was the wrong decision, and he questioned whether the Funkmaster won the first round. He changed his position on that a few weeks later. But what are your thoughts on McCarthy clarifying his position on this?
And another card that's kind of up there in the rumors is this supposed Chito Vera Dominic Cruz card. That fight is being talked about a lot. Ariel Helwani said that card is going to happen in Boston. Is that true?
In Boston?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Denied.
Fake news. Yeah, that's good too.
How would Ariel Helwani know? How we're going.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Scoops from.
One year on from fighting Floyd Mayweather, Logan Paul reflects. June 6, 2021. That's the day that Floyd Mayweather, one of the greatest boxers in the history of the sport, took on a YouTuber in Logan Paul. That night in Miami, Florida, saw both men go the distance, and after 8 rounds, no winner was announced. Still, the CompuBox stats showed that Mayweather landed 40% of his strikes, while Logan landed just under 13%. Regardless, Mayweather gave a lot of props to Logan in the post-fight interview, not only for taking the fight, but for being tougher and better than he originally thought. Still, he admitted that he held back a lot in that fight. Now, a year on from the bout, Logan Paul was reflecting on that night in Miami and stated this in a recent post on his Instagram. 1 year ago today, I fought Floyd Mayweather. He's hard to hit, but even harder to collect money from. Who should I fight next? In the months that followed that fight, Logan claimed he hadn't been paid for the bout, while Mayweather continuously denied that there was any funny business concerning the money. Logan has stated he's gearing up to sue Mayweather over the alleged unpaid money, but it's unclear where they are with that. What do you think about Logan's comments in this post about Mayweather? Thank you so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.